Welcome, everyone. I am Heather Kolakowski, Associate Director for the Cornell Institute for Healthy Futures. I am excited for our opportunity to share ideas and research today for our webinar, Designing for Healthy Sleep and Travel, a Research Perspective. For those of you who may not know, the Cornell Institute for Healthy Futures is the first academic center in the country to combine hospitality, environmental design, and health policy and management into a broad-based platform to improve service in healthcare, wellness, senior living, and related industries. Through our network of academic and industry professionals, we collaborate and share ideas to focus on our vision of a society where everyone receives excellent health and wellness-related services in well-managed, well-designed, and hospitable facilities. Today, we will hear from 3 academic scholars highlighting perspectives and tangible industry practices to increase understanding of the impacts of healthy sleep in our homes and in travel settings. Dr. Rebecca Robbins, instructor in medicine at Harvard Medical School, as well as a School of Hotel Administration alumna, is a sleep researcher focusing on ways to create interventions that improve sleep and circadian outcomes. Dr. Rana Zeta, associate professor, co-director and co-founder of the Health Design Innovations Lab here at Cornell University's Design and Environmental Analysis program, who has conducted research into designing spaces for healthier sleep outcomes. And our final presenter will be Dr. Rohit Verma, founding provost at Venn University, professor at the School of Hotel Administration, as well as our founding director for the Cornell Institute for Healthy Futures. And he has conducted research into wellness outcomes in travel and guest satisfaction. To begin, we would like to understand our audience a bit more. So please feel free to use the chat feature to introduce where you're from and what industry you're engaged in. And feel free to add questions to the chat that we will address after our presentations. We will start the program hearing from our participants as they share a little bit about the research that they have conducted. So now I'd like to turn over the mic to Dr. Rebecca Robbins. Rebecca?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know some are joining from across the globe. It's really exciting to be with you all. I just have such wonderful memories of my time on the Hill. I did my bachelor's degree, as Heather kindly alluded to. I also did, that wasn't all, I had a small teaching appointment at the medical school in Qatar, and then came back for my PhD. So Cornell just means so much to me, and I'm so excited to share with you now the 2 areas that I'm very passionate about. Of course, my research currently is very focused on the science behind our sleep and our circadian rhythms. But my other passion and my roots from the hotel school. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and ask if my slides could be projected. All right, so we'll go ahead and, I'm sorry, I can't tell on my end. Are they being projected now? Can you see them okay? Okay, terrific. Now if we could go to the next slide, please. Now, we're delighted that you're here because truly, although we're amidst a pandemic, we have another epidemic that's been going on for many more years. Although adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep, and we're all at different positions along that range. If you had 2 parents that were short sleepers, you might be lucky, one of the lucky few that gets by, so to speak, with just 7 hours. But then there are a lot of individuals who really benefit from getting 8 or 9 hours consistently of sleep at night for optimal health and wellness. Despite this need, 70% of Americans report sleeping less than the recommended 7 hours. And in addition, we see a huge issue of general sleep difficulty. So that could take the form of either difficulty falling asleep or difficulty maintaining sleep or waking up too early. And so those sleep difficulties affect about 30% of the population on any given night. So in addition to our current COVID-19 pandemic, we're also amidst a sleep epidemic. But I will say, and you'll see in a moment, that sleep plays a huge role in our immune system. So it couldn't be a more important trend, area to focus on now for all of us in our own lives, but particularly particularly anyone interested in wellness and travel moving forward after the pandemic. Now, next slide, please. So sleep is a tremendously important process. It was once said that sleep, by Dr. Alan Hobson, one of the founders of our field, that sleep is of the brain, by the brain, and for the brain. So sleep is really intimately connected with our cognitive function and so many other aspects that are related to our everyday success. So when we get sufficient sleep, looking at the upper right-hand quadrant, essentially that allows us to organize and integrate information that we receive over the course of the day. And this is of huge importance to our students. Solidifying their learnings, transferring memories from shorter term to longer term storage happens at a much accelerated rate during sleep than during wakefulness. So whenever my students at Harvard College say, "Prof, I'm pull an all-nighter before the exam," that's one of the worst things that you can possibly do. Healthy sleep leads to more creative and innovative thinking. So when we do studies in the corporate world, we look at those individuals, and unfortunately they're hard to find, but those who are making sleep a priority in corporate settings, leaders and employees alike, are much more likely to think outside the box. They're more productive, more creative, and more efficient. Now, fascinating research as we kind of go around the clock here. We've also shown that sleep allows us to regulate our appetite. So the kind of curves, if we look at the population level of obesity and sleep deprivation, both started in our country around the 1980s. And of course, it's not directly related. The two aren't cause and effect at the population level, but these two curves are almost identical. So once we started depriving ourselves of our sleep, collectively as a society, so too did our risk for obesity go up. And essentially at the kind of cellular level, what we're seeing is when we sleep deprived patients in the laboratory, what happens is they wake up and they're more likely for two things. First, to be deprived in their ability to tell when they're full, and then secondly, to overeat and make poor food choices. So unfortunately, that keeps our appetite out of sync and kind of out of whack. So that leads to our increased risk of obesity and other chronic conditions. And next slide, please. Now, this brings me to the topic of the current lecture. Now, I'm delighted to share with you some of the research that we've done on, again, two of my areas I'm very passionate about, which are my background from the hotel school and my current research program in sleep medicine. So despite being fundamentally a place for sleep, hotels, very few, draw really focused attention on this crucial process. You're much more likely to see hotels talk about the amenities, be they food and beverage or otherwise, than the quality of the sleep experience. But for business and leisure travelers alike, sleep is critical. There's nothing worse, and we've all been there, than a poor night of sleep in a hotel, waking up, maybe the phone was ringing at 2 o'clock in the morning, your neighbors were banging on the door. Any number of things can happen in the hotel environment, and when they do, and hopefully not, but if they do disrupt your sleep, it's going to impact the quality of your experience. Next slide. So what we did is we recruited a sample of U.S. adults, and these are frequent business or leisure travelers. The sample was approximately 50% leisure and 50% business, nearly to a T. We assessed sleep satisfaction, so how overall satisfied the guest was, or the participant was, with their last hotel stay and the quality of their sleep during that stay. We also examined sleep-related hotel attributes. So we had our survey respondents tell us about whether the curtains were thick and protected them from light outside the guest room environment. We asked about the quality of the linens and the pillows and the mattress. We also asked, lastly, about guest satisfaction. So we asked 3 questions to assess how overall satisfied and likely the guest was to return or maybe talk about their experience to a friend or a loved one. And then we used that as a single scale of guest satisfaction. We conducted ordinal hierarchical logistic regression modeling to examine the relationships between hotel attributes, sleep satisfaction, and guest satisfaction. So what did we find? Next slide. What we're looking at here are the relationships between these sleep-related hotel attributes that we assessed and poor guest satisfaction. So what you see, the first bar here is where we found, and these were because we conducted a hierarchical model. We conducted hierarchical modeling. We essentially asked for the computer to tell us what were the most important things, or what were the biggest barriers to sleep among our population. And we found 4 things. When it comes to overall sleep satisfaction, the biggest biggest culprits for taking away from good sleep during the hotel experience were fourfold. So the first is the sound of the air conditioning machine. So guests reported if the room was noisy, my sleep was of poor quality, and I really struggled. Next, and this was the biggest risk factor for poor sleep, this was uncomfortable bed linens. So not terribly surprising stuff, but the good news is we'll talk about in a moment when we get to some of these implications. A lot of these are modifiable. And third, uncomfortable pillows, so not supportive, maybe stuffy, old, need to be replaced. And finally, noise outside of the guest room environment. And next slide. So what we're looking at here are the hotel attributes that were most strongly associated with poor guest satisfaction overall. And they're slightly nuanced, but in some cases similar to those that were strongly related to sleep satisfaction. And those include the following. The first, again, sound of the air conditioning machine. You also see on the right-hand side of the slide, we also found that noise outside the hotel room was also a risk factor for poor sleep. So noise is directly related to our sleep. If there are sounds or things that are outside that you can't control, it's very hard to fall asleep and get a good night's rest. We found an inverse relationship between selecting the attribute, the room too small, with poor guest satisfaction. So if we kind of flip that logically, I know that's always hard, a double negative to process, but essentially what we can understand from that small odds ratio there is that a larger room would be better associated with with high guest satisfaction. And then poor poor linens and pillows were also found to be associated with a twofold increase for poor guest satisfaction. And this is work that I've done with some of my very dear colleagues, Dr. Michael Grender and Dr. Adam Nolden and Kim Seaver. So this is a study and part of a body of work. We did this large survey study and we're still analyzing some additional variables from this cohort. But essentially, we were really surprised and taken aback when we were doing the literature search for this paper. As sleep scientists, we thought that this would be, a rich area of inquiry, but there are actually very few studies that have really systematically looked at sleep in the hotel environment. And if we could go to our next slide, please. Now, lastly, we found in our study that there was a strong relationship between guest-reported sleep satisfaction and overall guest satisfaction. About 30% of our population reported not getting a good night's sleep in a hotel environment. So all by way of saying, our study highlights that guest sleep is really an underexplored area, but a key component of guest satisfaction and a driver of repeat and loyal customers potentially, although that would require a little bit longer-term perspective analysis. So finally, hotels interested in improving guest sleep might draw attention to some of these factors that we found to be strongly associated with sleep satisfaction and overall guest satisfaction. And finally, I'd like to just close out. I want to leave some time, of course, for my terrific co-presenters to, I think I've just one more thank you slide. Next slide, please. So thank you so much. If you have any other further questions about this research, I'd be delighted to answer them either here or if you get in touch on any of these platforms, I'd be delighted to speak more. I think this is a really exciting area, and as health has been a focus of kind of wellness in the tourism sector for so long, it's exciting to think that sleep might be another future frontier as soon as travel picks up and we're all able to get back and resume travel. So without further ado, I'll say thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. There's a lot to unpack from your presentation, and we have a couple of guests that are going to be putting questions in the chat that we'll get to after the presentations. Wonderful. So next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Reina Zada to learn more about her research that she's conducted. Reina?
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Hello, everyone. Good day or good evening. Today, I would like to discuss sleep environment and take a deep dive together about a healthy sleep environment. Rebecca highlighted some of the key points there and the magnitude of how sleep disturbance might affect us. So the material I'll be sharing with you, it's a result of 8 years of work with a team from architecture, design, sleep medicine clinicians, and nursing and education experts. Materials are a part of the program for improving and managing the sleep at Cornell, and there are different versions of the program, educational versions and technology versions that are being developed for various populations. So I credit my entire team for the material that I will be sharing today, and our funders, the NIFA and USDA and the Healthy Future Institute. The next 10 minutes, I'll share simple takeaways or tips that I will be applying in my day-to-day life as traveling or living or working during pandemic. I hope those takeaways are also helpful to you. Next slide, please. So this is the summary of the story and the takeaways, and the image on the right really describes the story also. So the first takeaway, daytime energy or daytime activities and nighttime sleep are closely interconnected. We usually might not consider this consciously, that what we do during the day might be related to how we sleep at night. So if I'm sedentary, not being active during the day, I might not consider that might influence the number of times I might wake up, or the issue of difficulty of me falling asleep. And the opposite is true too. Not getting good night's sleep, as you guys can imagine, does affect the quality of my wake time, my energy during the day. So on one side, you have good sleep quality, you have number of times waking up or difficulty falling asleep. On the other side of the coin, you have energy during the day, good performance, good mental performance, clear head, or lethargy and fatigue during the day. So these two play very closely together. The second takeaway from the research in the past 8 years is our environment plays a key role in regulating these two dynamics, the sleep and wake rhythms. There are other elements, there are other factors than environment as well that are modifiable. As you can imagine, it can be our behavior or nutrition or our knowledge or education, or whether or not we track our sleep and wake rhythms can influence these dynamics. So talking about the sleep environment as a key element, by that I mean our research has shown it has significant impact on how we sleep and our energy during the day. So these elements, and we will go through a few of these elements together, can either strengthen or disturb our sleep-wake cycle, and they can influence our natural neurobiological rhythm that create our circadian clock. So as you see those arrows, I meant to show you with the red arrows and the blue and black arrows, they are elements, they are activities, or they are stimulations from the environment that could take away or add and contribute to the strength of our sleep-wake cycle. Thank you. Next slide. So the whole story of this 10 minutes is this sentence: knowing how these environmental elements influence our sleep-wake rhythms, we can engineer our circadian rhythm toward aligning to our health goals. So by a few tips in a day-to-day basis, I try to introduce these to my day and night cycle to engineer better health. Next slide. Thank you. So I call this the sleep constellation, sleep-wake constellation. This is just an informal infographic, just showing a summary of our research, just a bird eye view. And it's not meant to be read, those sentences. We will go through this wheel together in a little bit. But I just want to show you there are different recommendations at different time of the day. Imagine if that at the top you have 12 o'clock, at the bottom you have 12 midnight. So this is like a clock that has 24 hours in it. And let's say if you look at the top left corner, you wake up, let's say at 8 a.m. and then let's say at the bottom right corner, you fall asleep around 10 p.m. This graphic is meant to depict that there are many things changing around us and inside us. For example, if you see the blue arrows during daytime, that shows our cortisol hormone, the wake time hormone, where it manifests itself during the day. And then at night, if you see that red area, white red area at the bottom, that shows our sleep hormone or melatonin that is meant to help us go to deep sleep and refreshing sleep. And our environment influence these internal rhythms, and then the activities around these will describe how we can disturb or improve and strengthen these rhythms. Next slide, please. So how can we use these tips, and what is the lesson really? This is it. Aligning our environmental condition with our desired circadian rhythm can prevent or contribute to the circadian disturbance. So environmental conditions we can modify, and our desired circadian rhythm. When I say our desired circadian rhythm, I mean sometimes we might be traveling, and so we have a destination in mind, and that is our desired rhythm, right? It may not be our natural rhythm, or we might be a night shift worker, or there's something we need to do at night we need to be fresh and bright for. So that will be important to think about what our goal is, and we can again manipulate or engineer our environment for that goal. If you guys at the end we have time, I'll talk about my travel story and how I try to change that. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here are the elements of the environment that by evidence do influence our sleep-wake cycle and the neurobiological rhythms of our body clock. Lighting, auditory environment, ambient temperature, environmental temperature, and ergonomics and comfort, where Rebecca was talking about the pillows and the touch and kinesthetic experiences. There are other elements here as well, like humidity, but I thought I'd just bring you the top 4. Lighting, by evidence, is the most important circadian rhythm environmental modulator. So it has had the largest effect by research in how it can influence the circadian clock. Next slide, please. So if I want to condense the past 8 years into a few takeaways, the next slides will show that, and how you could apply these as strategies in a day-to-day living or working or traveling. Light is very powerful, how it influences our biological clock. It can reset the circadian clock. When I think about light, if you look at the colors of those sun elements or graphics, I think about light in 3 ways. The first one is the intensity or the brightness, how intense or bright it is. The color temperature, is it close to daylight? And the timing of light exposure. Same light exposure during the day or late at night can have completely different effects. One can be beneficial, one can be harmful to my circadian rhythms. So thinking about this, one example of how to apply this is bedtime exposure, limiting bedtime exposure to bright light or blue light. So thinking about these 3 elements, being conscious of these 3 elements, I can modify and improve my health. Next slide, please. So thinking about that wheel, here are a few top key takeaways by research. Provide exposure to bright light during daytime. So I usually try sometime during the morning or late morning or noon, go outside and get some bright light. Increase natural light exposure. Remember we talked about the color of light, the color temperature of light. Sunlight has the ideal color temperature for our health. So it is good to expose yourself to natural daylight. For example, working by a window or just going for a walk outside. Last, Sometimes it may not be possible to get daylight or enough intensity light that is food for our brain, that is sufficient. So supplement with bright artificial light illumination indoors when needed. Avoid being in the biological darkness if, like me, your ambient environment is dark where you work at home. So during pandemic, many of us work at home and we get exposed to these steady, unchangeable, low-level lightness, and that puts us in the biological darkness. So maybe adding artificial lighting or using these strategies like going outside could help me feed my brain with the right environmental ingredients for healthy circadian rhythms. Next slide, please. Let's talk briefly about noise. The intensity of sounds around us affect sleep. The one takeaway of the last 8 years is sounds around us can have positive or negative effects. So we have good and bad sounds. It depends on timing, intensity, and nature and quality of the sound, you can imagine. So here's two brief takeaways, examples of that. Let's say a loud sound above 50 decibels at night, it is disturbing, so it's the negative noise or negative sound. It can especially disturb us during the shallow sleep stages. A positive role of sound example is right before bedtime, relaxing music, soothing sounds, familiar voices, or stories of loved one during bedtime can improve falling asleep and quality of sleep. So think about those nice musics right before bedtime. Next slide. These relate back to Rebecca's slide. These are quick implementation kind of strategies. What can I do as a organization leader, or as a traveler, or as a person? What can I do in my environment? So you could apply these in different scales. Reduced soundproof, finished services is one. So making environments soundproof, insulating the environment, keeping doors closed. Certain policies that help with, or strategies in a home environment, in the work environment. Using quiet equipment. Think about those elevators wakes us up sometimes in the hotel, or large ventilation or loud equipment around us that disturb us. And lastly, but not least, you can adjust activity or service deliveries around to be synchronized with this real sleep-wake rhythms. Next slide, please. Finally, this is the last takeaway about thermal comfort. As we said, temperature around us can influence the health of our sleep-wake cycle. So thermal comfort influences sleep and has to be adapted by both environment and individual conditions. Thermal comfort varies by age. It does. People's ability to adjust to the environment, thermal environment, decreases by age and varies. It also varies by gender for women and men. So having a flexible thermal environment enabling to be adjusted for your diverse users would be very important. Next slide, please. Back to this constellation of ideas, we can apply recommendations day to day. So I kind of magnified some of those examples of those activities, and if you had time during the conversation, we'll go through them. So we can apply these effectively to improve our health and align our circadian rhythm, our health with the activities of day and night we want. So as you see, for example, ergonomic and comfortable bed is at the bottom. What Rebecca was discussing about that improves our sleep time, health quality. And during the day, having light exposure, having healthy cognitive or physical activities, reasonable activities would help. So I say reasonable because based on our abilities, that varies who can, so that has to be relative to the person. And the next slide, please. Just finalizing and summarizing, aligning our environmental conditions with our circadian rhythm, with our desired circadian rhythm, can help our health, our quality sleep, but also daytime activity. And please feel free to contact me if you have questions. Thank you.
That was fabulous. So packed, lots of key takeaways. I love that, being able to be able to use it immediately, because I could use some more sleep. So I'm going to be shifting some things around at home. Now I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Rohit Verma, who will be talking more about the wellness factor. Rohit?
Thank you, Heather. First, hello, everyone. Xin chào. I'm saying hello from Vietnam, so that's hello in Vietnamese. It's such a pleasure to be part of this panel once again with my Cornell colleagues, especially from the Institute for Healthy Futures. Both Rebecca and Rana, along with Nicholas and Heather, all of you have been part of this organization, and I'm so happy to see that you continue to do amazing work. And thanks also to eCornell for hosting these webinars. So little bit about my current university, in case you're interested, what I'm doing here in Vietnam, leaving beautiful Ithaca. Cornell and Penn are advisors to a new university, which is being created here in Vietnam. And you can check it out more at vinuniversity.edu.vn if you want. And I'm happy to talk to you about that later. But back to the topic of our conversation, sleep and sleep's impact on productivity in life is actually quite personal to me. Before this pandemic happened, I used to travel across the continents quite a lot in my position, many times from North America to Asia. And my favorite activity in the plane was to sleep. Simply because, you come for a business trip for a week or sometimes even 3 to 4 days. And without sleep, it was very clear that productivity suffers a lot. And in my in the last couple of years or so, thanks to my wife, I have learned to like yoga quite a bit. And I'm noticing that, yoga has many of these asanas like Shavasana and so on, which really help you relax. And that, along with breathing and meditation, helps a lot in sleeping. And it has a tremendous positive effect on a person's life. So personally, I can see what Rebecca and Rana were saying. It really works on an individual's life. Now, in the hospitality industry, over the last, I would say, 15 to 20 years, I have done many studies on looking at the impact of hotel features, both the room features, facilities and amenities by the hotel in general, and the services which are offered on performance. And these performance measures can be customer satisfaction, willingness to recommend, willingness to return, willingness to pay, willingness to choose. And we have done all kinds of studies over time. And what is interesting is that, especially when we look at satisfaction, I think pretty much we know what are the big factors which matter, right? It's basically everything. What's different, though, is that depending on the context, the relative weight of different attributes of the hotels matter differently. So, for example, in some studies with business travelers for business hotels, we saw that the location, convenience, pricing, brand, loyalty points, those things were very important. When we looked at tech-savvy customers, for those customers, the brands which offer more technology features, which were more significant, and so on. So not surprising, but the relative weights for these things are what satisfaction studies give us. And then based on that, hotels can make decision. When we look at some other dependent variable, like willingness to pay, willingness to return, willingness to recommend, that is where we start seeing a much bigger impact of the hotel room features and hotel service features. And that's in general true regardless of which category of the hotel or which type of customers we look at. So that's where we start seeing some of these effects about the core aspect of the hotels. And that is why, depending on the category of the hotel, some hotels have chosen to focus more on, broadly speaking, what we call wellness features. Now, wellness features, I think it's a broad term. Sometimes people just equate wellness to having a fitness center or a spa or a healthy menu in the room. They are indeed part of it, but there's more to it, right? So environment inside the room, all the ideas which Rana talked about, basically, the light, the sound, the quality of the pillow, the quality of the linen, like what Rebecca said. But then beyond that, aroma, the cleanliness of the air inside the room. I think all of these directly or indirectly create the environment inside the room, which is more positive or more negative to the customers. And in the recent years, with several colleagues from the Healthy Futures Institute, I think for the last 6 or 7 years, we have been collecting data from hotels who have these wellness features in their hotel and comparing them to those who don't in the similar hotel categories. And they are very striking results. Basically, generally speaking, overall wellness features do make a difference in hotels' performance. Customers are more satisfied. They write more about these hotels on the social media, like TripAdvisors, etc. They talk more about these features in terms of the text. And there's also a slightly higher willingness to pay for the room, everything else being equal. And furthermore, we also found that actually the employees of the hotels who have these wellness features, they are happier. And if you think about it, if I'm a housekeeper and I have to clean 2 rooms, one room has a nice environment, it smells better, it has better sound quality, and the other one does not. So where will I go? Everything else being equal. Of course, I would be happier to work on the room or the floor which has these wellness features. So I think it's from looking at the performance data, it is hard to separate the impact of sleep, but indirectly the features of the room, they definitely impact the quality of the sleep. And especially in a couple of hotels, they are all part of a Healthy Futures Institute, like Six Senses and Canyon Ranch, Delos. All of these companies are doing wonderful things along this area. They all have some products which help with the quality of the light, like Rana said, quality of sound, which you can adjust, quality of aroma in the room, the air quality, the firmness of the mattress. All of these things can be adjusted. And for those type of rooms which have these features, there's a generally high satisfaction and willingness to pay. So there's a whole range of studies about that. And then other studies we have done is about looking at social media text analytics. So this is an ongoing study where several of us, we are looking at what type of comments people write when they stay in the hotel. And people, generally speaking, write about very positive experience or very negative experience. People don't take the time to write comments about something which is just business as usual or something just marginal, as you could imagine. And we don't see a lot of comments on the positive side about sleep at this point, but we do see once in a while comments about negative side of sleep. So for example, if I got a wonderful sleep, I don't go to social media and write it. But if I had a bad sleep, I do go and write it. I said, look, I stayed in this hotel and it was so noisy, or the pillow was not good, or the lighting was not good, and then people write it. So we do see a little bit of effect on the negative side, which means that sleep quality can be what is called a dissatisfier. So if you don't have a good one, then people are dissatisfied. But if you have it, then people talk about something else. They talk about, other aspects of the room, but underlying thing could be that they just got good sleep. And finally, I would like to say that, we see a trend here. In the last 10 years, slowly, customers are paying more attention to wellness features in the hotels. And now, slowly, we are starting to see the impact of those on performance. This is something very similar to what happened when the conversation about environmental sustainability in hotels started. I remember back in 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, that time period, there was initial talk about putting environmental features in hotels, getting LEED certifications, disclosure about environmental sustainability. In the first 5 years, many people thought it's just a marketing gimmick. There was a term used called greenwashing a lot, saying that hotels are just using this term to market without doing anything. But then over time, we saw that all of those features about environmental sustainability had both indirect and then later on positive direct effect on performance in terms of cost reduction, in terms of customer satisfaction, in terms of willingness to pay. The reason was the more environmentally sustainable hotels were actually better. They looked better, they felt better, the quality was better, the overall environment was better. And so therefore students liked them. The customers liked them. Same thing are happening with wellness features now, and sleep comes in that domain. For first 4 or 5 years, it just earlier part of this decade, it looked like people are saying, okay, you want to be labeled as a wellness hotel, just put a spa and a fitness center or put a swimming pool. And then over time, then somebody said, okay, you need to put a healthy menu. Doesn't matter whether somebody orders or not, just put a healthy menu. So it was almost the same way, some sort of marketing gimmick. But over time, I think now people are realizing that there's something real here. And I think now studies like what Rebecca and Rana are doing, it's actually showing that indeed there is some scientific truth behind them. And by paying attention to wellness in general and then sleep in particular, we can have better performance. So I will stop with that, and I'm happy to elaborate about any aspects of these studies. What I mentioned is a summary from many different studies, and some of these are ongoing, some are completed. So with that, thank you very much for your attention, and back to you, Heather.
Thank you so much, Rohit. Wow, that's great. Great summation and thinking about wellness and the features. And I think we'll have a question coming up on that. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be switching to Q&A, and we have about a little less than 20 minutes left. So people have been putting into the chat some really amazing questions. So feel free to pop those in. I'm going to start off with one of the first questions that came in, and it's specific to Rebecca in particular, but I think Rana also might have some insights. What are the consequences of too much sleep? I don't understand that, never had it, but what are the consequences of too much sleep?
This is a great question. So in sleep medicine, we have a concept called a U-shaped relationship between sleep duration and adverse outcomes. So we model, if we plot, sleep duration on the y-axis and then, sleep duration on the x-axis and risk for chronic conditions on the y-axis is the outcome. Essentially, the risk goes up if you're getting less than 7 hours, and then it drops down when you're in the healthy zone between 7 and 9 hours. Now, we do see in some epidemiological studies, when we're doing population surveillance of participants over time, we do see that a longer duration sleep, so consistently sleeping 9 hours or more, is also associated. So it's the other side of that U. But the critique here is that there are a lot of chronic conditions among people who are sleeping longer. And so we do see that it might be an artifact of those underlying conditions that these individuals require longer sleep. So it's actually a very contentious area of the literature. So it's a really interesting question, because we do have lots of data to show that when we really comprehensively control for potentially confounding factors, self-reported health, chronic conditions, that risk for adverse outcomes at the higher end of the sleep duration spectrum goes away. So we also just published some data 2 weeks ago on the relationship between sleep duration and Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And what we found is that the risk was highest in the short sleepers, but there was no relationship among longer sleepers and neurocognitive decline. So it's a very good area. One of the wonderful people I work with at Harvard, Chuck Czeisler, who developed some of the understanding that we have in the field that Rana cited on the connection between light and our circadian rhythm. So his pioneering work has kind of heralded this understanding that when you really thoroughly control, there might not be as many risks. And there's actually a debate at our American Academy of Sleep Medicine where Dr. Czeisler and a few others participated. So it's a really kind of hot area of the research, but all by way of saying, if you are truly, healthy, managing a condition, if you do have a condition, and, getting a little bit, you're on the maybe 9 hours of sleep spectrum, we'd really say not to worry. just the other element, in addition to getting enough sleep duration, that we haven't quite touched on yet is consistency of our sleep schedules. So that might be another area, because if you're not getting consistent sleep, your internal rhythm is very confused and your body is not sure when it's supposed to be tired and when it's supposed to be alert. So keeping your schedule consistent can be one other area to rule out any problem, because then if you keep your sleep consistent, you'll fall asleep faster, and all of those things that will help your sleep consolidate.
So that actually kind of leads into another question that about the circadian rhythms that I think Rana was talking about as well. One of our audience members asked, does the recommended 7 to 9 hours of sleep have to be in one interval, or could it be 2 to 3 times a day? For instance, 1 to 2 hours sleep in the afternoon and then a 5 to 7 hours sleep at night?
Happy to jump back in. So great question. Unfortunately, we really benefit from monophasic sleep cycles. As human beings, animals are different. Dogs, for instance, are polyphasic sleepers. They're taking small dog naps and cat naps over the course of the day. But a consistent duration of sleep is really the best for all of us. That allows our brains to reap all of the benefits of the different stages of sleep, and they're nuanced over the course of the night. It's not just your head hits the pillow and you're out. That is a myth, because we published a study 2 years ago on the top myths about sleep, and that was one of the biggest ones, that there's this view that you kind of go to sleep and it's this abstract but monolithic process. But all of the evidence points to the contrary, that the activity in the brain is extremely rich and robust, and you really need the full kind of consolidated block of sleep to reap all of those benefits as we kind of go in and out of these different stages. I will just note that an afternoon nap is a fantastic way to pay back some sleep debt. So if you are traveling across time zones, if you're just a little bit sleepier than normal, you didn't sleep very well the night before, then a small nap in the afternoon is fantastic. And one of my mentors, Dr. James Moss, who was at Cornell for many years and a prolific sleep kind of communicator and researcher, and he coined the term power nap to kind of promote this idea that a short period of sleep in the afternoon is fine, but the real recommendation is to get one consolidated block.
Rana, I'm gonna ask this next question for you, because you hinted at it in your presentation. From one of our guests watching, they said, when traveling to different time zones, is there a way to alter the body's biological circadian rhythm without drugs if all the environmental factors are optimal? And you mentioned you had a story about travel.
Exactly. So I try to apply what I learned in my day-to-day life. So one thing I've been trying to do when I travel, apply some of these tips. So here's one example. So I was traveling to Ireland from New York, and I was leaving around 7 p.m. and I would arrive maybe around 7 a.m. or there early morning, and I had a presentation at noon, so I had to be sharp. And so how did I approach this? Because I wouldn't get sufficient sleep, because I would be on the flight probably around 3-4 hours of uninterrupted sleep, and while it would be early morning my time, I had to be sharp and alert. Before I share the tip, I have to say this: when you wake up in the morning, it is good to note it takes us 2 hours from the moment we wake up for our brain to get to its normal performance, its full potential. So knowing that, the first tip, if you're traveling and you're driving to the airport and you have flight, differences you have to drive, note that if you're taking off at 8 a.m. and you're waking up at 7:30, your brain performance may not be at its best. You jump into driving. So in that situation, I try to wake up early so that my brain wakes up by time. So I give that, remember that 2-hour period. Now, during that flight, what I did to apply some of the things I learned was I remember one principle, the ritual of healthy sleep. The ritual of healthy sleep, what sleep medicine experts say, a couple of hours before your desired sleep time, when the body hormones needs to initiate secretion of sleep hormones, etc., you need to follow a certain ritual. That means behavioral and environmental control of disturbing stimulants. So disturbing stimulants, the late night could be bright light or excitement, or maybe eating something really sweet. So I did want to get good hours of sleep during the flight. Imagine the flight environment now surrounding me, and how can I modify that, make sure my body goes into sleep fast so I can take the best use of that 3 hour undisturbed times, and I get deep sleep. So here it came, the flight, we took off. Out of hospitality, the flight industry brought us good food, really fatty, and some ice cream. So the first thing I did, I made sure I do not eat the dessert. So limiting the sweets, because it would be an awakening effect and disturbing my melatonin. So I made sure that I will not be disturbing, stimulating my rhythm by sugar intake. So number one tip. Number two, think about the ritual of sleep. You need to limit emotional excitement, environmental light exposure. So as you take on this short flight, you need to be fresh when you get there, destination. Think about all the elements we talked about: the light, the temperature, the noise, all the stimulants around you, and your comfort. So go prepared. Make sure you have tools with you to make sure the light disturbance, you can cover your eyes and comfortably you can control the light disturbance. I usually take earplugs with me. I set up a steady music so that loud noises around me are canceled off. So, and your comfort. So every step you take for your thermal comfort or physical comfort, so taking a pillow or make sure you're warm enough, will influence your sleep time. So hopefully by the time you hear the sound that says you're going to be landing, you have had a short but restful sleep time.
Good points. I can't wait to travel again to try that out. One of the questions I have now is for Rohit in particular, because of the research that you've done in regards to guest satisfaction in hotels. So this idea of using sleep or features of the room as a competitive advantage. There are several hotel companies that are talking about their bed linens or their beds and trying to use that as a differentiating factor for other hotels. But at a certain point, might these become less of a competitive advantage and more of a basic requirement for hotels?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. And I would suggest to the hotel companies that they should not focus on little features like what you mentioned, linen or pillow or something, but focus on a broad concept. So it's very unlikely that one of these individual features will have a huge impact on performance. And like you said, Heather, over time, these things can be easily replicated. But if a hotel is known for its overall health and wellness, or is known for the most tech-savvy hotel, so what it means is that under that umbrella, the hotel is doing whatever is best available knowledge at that point in time. So if today it's about linen and pillow, then that's what it will be. But tomorrow, maybe there's something else will come up, but the broad umbrella remains the same. I think that's the way to think about it. And if you look at successful hotel chains, Ritz-Carlton, Four Seasons, Marriott, Hilton, you just name it. Any of these large chains, that's how they have developed their brand. They have created an impression about what they stand for. And so when the guests go there, they know exactly the overall thing. They're not going there for one small feature. I think that's the way to think about it.
I do remember one hotel company talking about their shower heads, and they had lots of materials highlighting that they used this amazing shower head for your stay. So we just have a couple minutes left for our time together. And we had some questions that I'm kind of curating through the chat of this idea of if someone is traveling, if you're traveling into an unfamiliar location, and you want to optimize your sleep, what might be some specific steps that guests can take to improve their sleep while traveling or being in an unfamiliar hotel? One classic example with my kids is I bring their pillow because they're familiar with their pillow. It's their pillow. But what might be some other things that guests can do to mitigate some of these negative impacts in a hotel room when they're staying there? That's a free ball there. Anyone can jump.
I'll jump in.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
No, please.
No, you go ahead. Please, you first.
Very kind. So I'll just jump in with a couple thoughts and maybe building off of what Rohit just said about the tremendous promise of, this is where the intersection of design and health are so exciting, because to envision a hotel of the future where you can check in and rest assured that, this isn't a particular amenity, but it's, the design of the environment, the guest room, the hotel itself, for light exposure, for fresh air, for healthy linens. What if that's the standard? And isn't that exciting to think that the environment has can have such a positive impact on our health? I will just say, though, to your specific question about ways to overcome some of the barriers to healthy sleep on the road. Unfortunately, travel can be stressful. So you're kind of set up, for failure in some respects, right? You've flown maybe across time zones, that, maybe there have been delays. So it is a stressful experience. And so the guests, we're all kind of well served to think about things that suit us. Because at the end of the day, if we take a page from, honestly, the children in our society, we do much better from a sleep standpoint. And for them, sleep is all about comfort. Their mom or dad's voice gets quiet. They have a consistent schedule. They have a blankie or a lovey that comforts them. And frankly, as adults, we would do well to think about that. If it's a cozy scarf that's, cashmere and comfortable and you can wear on the airplane, and it's, is comforting to you and hopefully helps you get a little sleep on the plane. And then it's something you use, at the hotel. Aromatherapy is also a great strategy, whether that's, providing that on the hotel side or taking that with you. Scents have an immediate effect on our our ability to relax and kind of change us, out of our stressful state that might have been the travel experience overall. Two last things. I always travel and do recommend earplugs and an eye mask. Those are just good stopgap measures. It sounds like Rana likes to fall asleep to music, and that's great. It's kind of an individual preference. So if you are soothed by that, make sure to have that. Either earbuds or something along those lines that you could use. But it's all about comfort and finding ways to soothe yourself as we travel.
If I can add just one quick point on that. What has worked for me, and I know for some other frequent travelers of the pre-pandemic days, is that try to get used to the routine for the time zone you're landing in as quickly as possible. So if I'm reaching someplace like Rana's example, 7 o'clock in the morning, I should start behaving like it's 7 o'clock. And yes, first 3, 4, 5 hours may be hard, but then somehow body miraculously adjusts to the time. And maybe by the first evening, I'm a little bit extra tired, but second day it gets better. So what I mean is that, if it's morning and you go for exercise, then go exercise. If you have a cup of coffee, just have a cup of coffee. If you go for a walk, you go for a walk. So do that, and I think naturally somehow body adjusts. That's my advice.
Maybe if I can add one point to that, I think just emphasizing and highlighting stress reduction, but also think about the daytime activity you're having. So adjust the daytime activity. If you're in a hotel, go outside, move around, or what we call physical or cognitive stimulation. So keep yourself awake and engaged. That would be helpful. If you are especially in northern climates where the sun is limited, where I was traveling in December in Sweden, so I didn't have much daylight. So I try to compensate that stimulation with physical activity, and so that it, again, my rhythm, day, wake, and sleep rhythm self-adjust themselves faster.
Well, we have covered some amazing topics, really condensed in this hour. I want to give a big, huge thank you to Rebecca, Rana, and Rohit for this fascinating presentation, some great takeaways for our guests and audience attendees. Thank you so much to the team at eCornell. We hope to see more of you at future Cornell Institute for Healthy Futures events. So please check out back on our website or sign up for our newsletter to keep in the loop. And I hope that everyone has a very good night's sleep tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Nice chatting with you all.
Bye-bye.